The weathered hand clutched the small red box of candies, trembling slightly against the bus's gentle sway. Ming felt the stares before he heard the whispers. 73 years had taught him much about the weight of eyes. The morning bus was especially crowded today, filled with commuters in pressed suits and students with backpacks. His arthritic fingers tightened around the wooden handle of his candy box as he shuffled down the narrow aisle. The familiar scent of peppermint and caramel mingled with the metallic smell of the bus. "Ticket," the driver said without looking up, his voice as mechanical as the engine beneath them. Ming produced his worn senior pass with his free hand. "Good morning, Mr. Wei," he said softly. "Another beautiful day the Lord has made." The driver, Daiyu Wei, glanced up briefly, his expression unchanging as he waved Ming through. 43 years old and 20 of them behind the wheel of bus number 12, Wei had seen Ming board his bus nearly every morning for the past 7 years. Always with the same faded black cap, always with the same box of candies, always with the same greeting about the Lord's Day. Ming made his way slowly toward the middle of the bus, his joints protesting each step. The box of candies rattled gently, a sound that announced his presence to the regular passengers who didn't need to look up from their phones to know who had boarded. "Here comes the candy man," someone muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Ming smiled, pretending not to notice the tone. He found a pole to hold on to, tucking his candy box against his chest with his other arm. His blue jacket, too large for his shrinking frame, hung loosely from shoulders that had once carried sacks of rice across fields. Now they carried only memories and a small wooden box of sweets. "Would anyone like to buy a candy?" Ming asked, his voice gentle but clear. "Only 2 yuan, homemade with care." A few regular passengers nodded politely but returned to their phones. Others pretended not to hear him at all. Ming was used to this. He waited patiently, swaying with the motion of the bus, his eyes crinkling at the corners with hope. "I don't understand why they let him do this," a young businessman in a grey suit said to his colleague, not bothering to lower his voice. "It's not a market stall, it's public transportation." "Heard he's been doing it for years," his friend replied with a shrug. "Some kind of special permission because he's old or something." "A special permission to annoy everyone every morning," the businessman snorted, adjusting his tie. "What a waste of time. Who even buys candy at 7 in the morning?" Ming's smile didn't falter, though something in his eyes dimmed slightly. He turned away from the businessman, focusing instead on a young mother with a child of about 5 years old. The little boy was looking at the candy box with undisguised interest. "Would your son like a sweet?" Ming asked the mother, his voice warm. Before she could answer, the businessman spoke again. "You'd let your kid eat candy from some old man's box? Who knows how long those have been sitting there? Probably made in his bathroom." The mother pulled her son closer, averting her eyes from Ming. "Actually," Ming said, his voice still gentle, "I make them fresh every 3 days. My daughter helps me. She's a nurse at Central Hospital." The businessman rolled his eyes. Sure. And I suppose you bless each one too, right, old man? Is that why you're charging 2 yuan for what looks like the cheapest candy in the district?" Several passengers chuckled. Ming's cheeks flushed slightly, but he maintained his dignity. "Every blessing is free," he said simply. "The candy costs 2 yuan, because sugar and wrappers aren't free, young man." The businessman's colleague laughed, nudging him. "He got you there, Feng." Feng, the businessman, frowned and turned back to his phone. Ming continued his slow progress through the bus, occasionally stopping to offer his wares. An elderly woman bought a piece of ginger candy, placing the coins carefully in Ming's palm with a nod of understanding between them. A college student purchased a chocolate drop, his eyes never leaving his textbook as he handed over the money. From his driver's seat, Wei watched in the rearview mirror. 7 years of the same routine, the same gentle voice offering sweets, the same polite rejections or occasional sales. Wei had complained to his supervisor once, 4 years ago, about the old man selling on his route. The response had been a shrug, and something about a special permit for seniors with limited income. So Wei had stopped complaining out loud, but the irritation remained, another pebble in his shoe on a job full of discomforts. As the bus approached the central business district, Feng and his colleague prepared to disembark. As they passed Ming, Feng deliberately bumped the old man's arm, causing him to stumble slightly and several candies to fall from the box onto the floor. "Oh, clumsy me," Feng said with mock concern. "Sorry about that, old-timer." Ming steadied himself against a seat, watching as 3 wrapped candies rolled under the feet of passengers. "No harm done," he said, though his voice was strained. He carefully knelt to retrieve the fallen sweets, his knees cracking audibly. A young woman in a red coat reached down quickly, gathering the candies before Ming could bend all the way down. "Here," she said, placing them back in his box. "Are you all right?" "Yes, thank you," Ming said, genuine gratitude warming his face. "You're very kind, Miss Lihua," she supplied. "And it's nothing. Some people could learn basic manners." She glanced meaningfully at Feng's back as he exited the bus. "We all have our burdens," Ming said, straightening his cap. "Some carry them on the inside where they're heavier." Lihua tilted her head, studying the old man with new interest. "That's a generous way of looking at it," Ming smiled. "Generosity costs nothing and pays dividends." At the next stop, near the university, Lihua prepared to leave. She hesitated, then took out 4 yuan. "2 candies, please. One for me and one for later." Ming carefully selected 2 pieces, a strawberry cream and a honey drop, and placed them in her palm. "The second one is free," he said, returning 2 yuan. "For your kindness." "But please," Ming insisted gently, "it would honor me." Lihua accepted with a small bow of her head. As she left, Ming noticed the driver watching in the mirror. Their eyes met briefly before Wei looked away, his expression unreadable. The morning continued, the bus filling and emptying at various stops like the tide. Ming sold perhaps 12 candies in total, enough to cover the bus fare and maybe a simple lunch. Around 11 o'clock, the bus began to empty as the morning rush subsided. Ming found a seat near the middle, easing his tired legs. His box was still more than half full. Wei, glancing back during a stop, noticed the old man rubbing his knee. 7 years, and he'd never seen Ming sit down before the Riverside Park stop, which was usually where the old man got off to sell to the afternoon crowds. Something must be bothering him today. Not that it was any of Wei's concern. He had his own problems. A daughter needing braces his insurance wouldn't fully cover. A wife whose mother was ill in another province. A supervisor who kept cutting corners on maintenance schedules. The bus was nearly empty now, just Ming and 3 other passengers scattered through the vehicle. Wei could hear the soft click of candies as Ming rearranged them in his box. The sound had once irritated him. Now it was just part of the background noise of his route, like the squeak of the rear door or the rattle of the fare box. At the Longevity Gardens stop, an elderly woman boarded, moving slowly with a cane. She wore a purple jacket despite the warm spring day, and her white hair was neatly pinned up. Ming looked up, his face brightening. "Mrs. Zhang," he called, "how wonderful to see you today." The woman squinted, then smiled in recognition. "Mr. Liu, I didn't know you took this route." "Every day," Ming replied, patting the seat beside him. "Please join me. How is your grandson?" Mrs. Zhang made her way to Ming, accepting the offered seat with a grateful sigh. "Accepted to medical school," she said proudly. "Just last week, the letter came with all the scholarship details." "Wonderful news!" Ming clasped his hands together in delight. "We've been praying for that, haven't we?" Mrs. Zhang nodded, her eyes crinkling. 7 years of prayers, and your grandson, still in Australia. 3rd year of his engineering program, Ming confirmed. He calls every Sunday evening. Wei, listening despite himself, frowned slightly. 7 years of prayers. Had the old man and this woman known each other before his bus route? The 2 elderly passengers continued their conversation, their voices a gentle murmur in the quiet bus. Wei found himself driving more smoothly than usual, avoiding the potholes he sometimes hit just to break the monotony of his day. "Are you going to the community center?" Mrs. Zhang asked Ming. "Yes, after the park. Sister Lin is organizing another food distribution on Saturday. I'm helping with the planning committee. Your candies for the children again?" Ming smiled, opening his box to show her. "I set aside special ones for the little ones. No charge, of course." The candy box gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the bus windows. It was clearly handcrafted, wood polished by years of handling. Inside, wrapped candies of various colors were arranged neatly in compartments. Some were store-bought hard candies, but many appeared homemade, wrapped in wax paper with handwritten Chinese characters on them. In the rearview mirror, Wei could see the old man's face clearly for perhaps the first time. Deep wrinkles mapped a life of both smiles and sorrows across weathered skin. The black cap, faded from years of wear, sat atop thin white hair. His blue jacket, clearly once belonging to a larger man, hung from shoulders bent by age but not broken by it. Despite being at least in his 70s, there was a brightness in his eyes that spoke of an inner light, untouched by time. As the bus hit a small bump, the candies rattled in their wooden home. Ming steadied the box with hands marked by liver spots and prominent veins, yet they moved with surprising dexterity as he selected a candy and offered it to Mrs. Zhang. "Your favorite," he said, "ginger with a touch of honey." Mrs. Zhang accepted it with a small bow of her head. "You remembered?" "Of course." Ming's smile revealed teeth that were his own, but had seen better days. "How could I forget?" Wei turned his attention back to the road, but found himself listening more intently to their conversation. "After my Huan passed," Mrs. Zhang was saying, her voice softer now, "I didn't think I could continue the weekly visits to the children's hospital. 40 years we did that together, you know." "I remember," Ming nodded. "He had such a way with the little ones. That puppet he made, the dragon with one tooth." Mrs. Zhang laughed, the sound like wind chimes. "Yes, I still have it, but I haven't been able to. It doesn't feel right without him." Ming patted her hand gently. "The children would still love it, I think, and Huan would want his dragon to keep bringing smiles." There was a moment of silence filled only by the rumble of the bus engine. "Perhaps," Mrs. Zhang finally said. "Perhaps it's time." She unwrapped the candy and popped it into her mouth. "Still perfect," she murmured. Wei watched as Ming's face lit up with simple pleasure at the compliment. The bus approached the Riverside Park stop, and Ming stood, steadying himself on the seat. "This is my stop," he told Mrs. Zhang. "Will you be at prayer meeting tomorrow?" "God willing," she replied with the ease of long custom. "Don't forget your umbrella today. They're predicting rain this afternoon." Ming patted his coat pocket. "Right here. God bless you, Mrs. Zhang. And you, Brother Ming." As Ming made his way to the front of the bus, Wei found himself slowing more carefully than usual for the stop. The old man paused beside the driver's seat. "Thank you, Mr. Wei," he said with his customary politeness. "I noticed you avoided the big pothole near Green Street today. My knees appreciate it." Wei, surprised that Ming had noticed such a detail, merely nodded. As the old man descended the steps, Wei found himself calling out, "Mind the gap, sir!" Ming looked back, his eyes twinkling with surprised pleasure at the small courtesy. "I always do, Mr. Wei. God keep you safe today." Then he was gone, moving slowly but purposefully toward the park entrance, his candy box held securely under his arm. Wei closed the doors and pulled away from the curb, his thoughts uncharacteristically lingering on the old candy seller. The park was busy for a weekday, mothers with young children enjoying the spring sunshine, retirees playing chess at stone tables, and a few office workers taking late lunches on benches. Ming found his usual spot near the playground, setting his candy box on a small folding stool he carried in a bag slung across his back. A young boy of about 7 approached, eyeing the candy box with interest. His mother stood a few paces behind, checking her phone. "Hello, young sir," Ming said with a small bow. "Would you like a sweet today? The boy nodded shyly. What kinds do you have? Ming opened the box fully, displaying the colorful array. All kinds for all tastes, sweet, sour, spicy, or surprising. Surprising? The boy's eyes widened. What's a surprising candy? Ming leaned in conspiratorially. Those are special. They look ordinary on the outside, but inside they're extraordinary, like people. The boy considered this. Can I have a surprising one? An excellent choice. Ming selected a plain-wrapped candy from a special corner of the box. That will be 2 yuan. The boy handed over the coins his mother had given him. Have you always sold candy? He asked, turning the wrapped sweet over in his small hands. Ming smiled. Not always. Once I built bridges. Real bridges? Big ones? Yes, real bridges. Ming's eyes grew distant with memory. Big ones that cars and buses drive across. That's much cooler than selling candy, the boy said with the brutal honesty of childhood. Ming laughed. Perhaps, but do you know what bridges and candy have in common? The boy shook his head. They both connect people. Bridges connect places, but candy... Ming tapped the sweet in the boy's hand. Candy connects hearts. I don't understand, the boy admitted. Ming nodded. Let me tell you a short story. Once there was a great emperor who wanted to find the wisest person in his kingdom to be his advisor. He sent his guards to bring 3 finalists to the palace. He showed them a massive door that needed to be opened and asked each one how they would open it. The boy unwrapped his candy but didn't eat it yet, caught up in the story. The first finalist, an engineer, examined the hinges and lock, calculated the force needed, and asked for 5 strong men to help him push it open. The second, a scholar, studied ancient texts about the door and declared it couldn't be opened at all. It was meant to teach humility. What about the third person? The boy asked. The third was a simple farmer. He walked up to the door and knocked. Ming smiled. When someone answered from the other side, he simply asked them to open it. The boy considered this, then laughed. That's clever. Yes, Ming agreed. The emperor chose the farmer as his advisor, because the wisest action is often the simplest, and because the farmer understood something important. Most barriers between people can be overcome by simply reaching out. The boy finally popped the candy in his mouth, his expression changing to surprise and delight. It's changing flavors, he exclaimed around the sweet. Yes, Ming said. Sweet, then sour, then sweet again, just like life. The boy's mother finally looked up from her phone. Xiao Jun, we need to go. Thank the man for the candy. The boy bowed slightly. Thank you for the candy and the story, sir. Ming returned the bow. You're very welcome, young sir. As they walked away, Ming heard the boy asking his mother if she knew that candy could connect hearts. He smiled to himself, straightening the remaining sweets in their compartments. The afternoon passed steadily. Ming sold perhaps another 20 candies, mostly to children or their indulgent grandparents. As the shadows lengthened, he felt the first drops of rain Mrs. Zhang had warned about. He packed up his stool and closed his candy box, heading toward the bus stop to catch the number 12, back toward the community center. The rain intensified as he waited, and despite the umbrella, his shoes and the cuffs of his pants were damp by the time the bus arrived. To his surprise, Mr. Wei was still driving, though his shift usually ended in the early afternoon. Covering for a colleague, Wei explained without being asked as Ming boarded. Flu season. Ming nodded in understanding, showing his pass before making his way to a seat. The bus was relatively empty, with only a handful of passengers seeking shelter from the increasingly heavy rain. At the next stop, a young woman boarded with a small child, both soaking wet despite sharing a broken umbrella. The woman's face was streaked with either rain or tears, possibly both. The child, a girl of about 4, was sniffling, her little shoes squelching on the bus floor. Ming watched as they took seats across from him, the woman wrapping her thin jacket around the child. Without hesitation, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small towel he kept for hot days. He stood crossing the aisle. "Excuse me," he said gently. "For the little one." He offered the towel. The woman looked up, wariness in her red-rimmed eyes. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the towel. "Thank you," she murmured, beginning to dry her daughter's hair. Ming returned to his seat, noticing Wei watching in the mirror again. Their eyes met briefly before the driver returned his attention to the road. The little girl's sniffles subsided as she warmed up. She kept looking curiously at Ming's candy box. Eventually, her mother noticed and whispered something to her about not staring. Ming smiled and opened his box. "Would your daughter like a candy?" he asked. The woman tensed. "We can't. I don't have any extra money today." "No charge," Ming said immediately. "A gift for a rainy day." The mother hesitated, pride warring with the desire to give her child a small happiness. Finally, she nodded. "What do you say, Mei Li?" "Thank you," the little girl said shyly, as Ming held out the box for her to choose. She selected a bright pink candy, her small face lighting up as she clutched the treasure. The simple joy in her expression was payment enough for Ming. He closed his box and returned to his seat, noticing the mother's grateful look. The rain drummed steadily on the roof of the bus as they continued through the city. At one stop, the businessman from the morning, Feng, boarded, his expensive suit now protected by an equally expensive umbrella. He shook it off outside before entering, but still managed to spray droplets on Wei's console. "Watch it," Wei said sharply. Feng barely acknowledged him, scanning his pass with the entitled air of someone who viewed public transportation as a necessary inconvenience. His eyes landed on Ming, recognition followed by a smirk crossing his face. He took a seat several rows away, pulling out his phone. The little girl had finished her candy and was now chattering happily to her mother about the changing colors of the raindrops on the window. Ming watched them with a gentle smile, reminded of his own daughter at that age, full of wonder at the world's small miracles. The bus lurched suddenly as Wei swerved to avoid a cyclist who had appeared without warning from between parked cars. Everyone was thrown slightly forward, but the little girl, who had been kneeling on her seat, lost her balance completely and tumbled into the aisle. Her cry of surprise turned to pain as she landed awkwardly on her arm. Her mother was instantly beside her, gathering her up as the child began to wail in earnest. "Mei Li, are you hurt? Let Mama see." The woman's voice was tight with concern as she examined her daughter. Ming stood, steadying himself against a seat. "Is she all right?" he asked, genuine worry in his voice. The mother carefully felt her daughter's arm, which the child was now holding protectively against her chest. "I think it might be sprained," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm taking her to the clinic near our stop." Feng looked up from his phone, annoyance crossing his face. "Can you quiet her down? Some of us are trying to work here." The mother flushed, trying to soothe her crying child while shooting an apologetic look around the bus. Ming frowned at Feng before turning back to the woman. "The central hospital is 3 stops ahead," he said. "My daughter works there. She's a nurse in pediatrics. I can take you to her directly. No waiting." The woman hesitated, clearly torn between trust and caution. "I've been selling candy on this route for 7 years, Ming added gently. "Mr. Wei can vouch for me." He glanced toward the driver, who was watching the interaction in his mirror. To everyone's surprise, Wei nodded. "He's harmless," he confirmed gruffly. "Regular as clockwork, this one." The woman's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said to Ming. "That would be very helpful." When they reached the hospital stop, Ming helped the woman gather her things while still carrying her now quiet but clearly uncomfortable daughter. As they prepared to exit, Ming turned to Wei. "Thank you for your kind words, Mr. Wei," he said with a small bow. "God bless you for your help." Wei merely grunted in response, but his eyes followed the trio as they made their way down the steps and toward the hospital entrance, the old man holding his umbrella over the woman and child, despite getting wet himself. The rest of Wei's extended shift passed uneventfully. The rain continued steadily, the rhythmic swish of the wipers marking time as he completed his route. His thoughts kept returning to the old candy seller and his quiet acts of kindness throughout the day. 7 years on his route, and Wei realized he knew almost nothing about the man beyond his unfailing politeness and his daily candy sales. As Wei began his final circuit, the bus mostly empty now in the early evening rain, he found himself watching for Ming at the hospital stop. But the old man didn't reappear. Wei told himself it was merely curiosity that made him slow down slightly at each subsequent stop, scanning the waiting passengers for a familiar black cap and blue jacket. The community center came into view, its lights glowing warmly against the grey evening. Wei pulled up to the stop, opening the doors more out of habit than expectation. To his surprise, Ming appeared, hurrying as much as his aged legs would allow, still sheltering the young mother and child under his umbrella. They boarded quickly, the woman thanking Wei for waiting, though he hadn't consciously done so. Ming helped them to seats before approaching the driver. "Thank you, Mr. Wei," he said, his clothes damp but his eyes bright. "The little one is fine, just a minor sprain. My daughter wrapped it properly and gave her a special bandage with cartoon characters." Wei found himself nodding, oddly relieved. "Good," he said simply. Ming smiled and made his way back to sit near the woman and child. Wei closed the doors and pulled away from the curb, occasionally glancing in his mirror at the unlikely trio in the back. The little girl was now wearing Ming's faded black cap, giggling as it slipped over her eyes, her injured arm nearly forgotten. As the bus approached the end of the line, Wei made an announcement. "Last stop coming up. Everyone must exit." The few remaining passengers gathered their belongings. The young mother looked concerned as she checked the time on her phone. "Is something wrong?" Ming asked her. "The rain," she said quietly. "We have 6 blocks to walk, and our umbrella—" She gestured to the broken umbrella, now little more than a collection of bent metal and torn fabric. Ming glanced outside at the pouring rain, then back at the tired woman and drowsy child. He seemed to come to a decision. "Mr. Wei," he called to the front of the bus, "does your route take you near Harmony Apartments by any chance?" Wei, who was checking his end-of-shift paperwork, looked up. "No. End of the line is end of the line." Ming nodded in understanding. "Of course. Thank you anyway." Wei returned to his paperwork, but found himself unable to focus. He sighed, putting down his pen. "Where exactly in Harmony Apartments?" he asked, his voice gruff. Ming's face brightened. "Building 3. It would be a great kindness, Mr. Wei." Wei glanced at his watch. Already 20 minutes past the end of his shift. His wife would be waiting with dinner. But the rain was coming down in sheets now, and the thought of the woman and small child walking 6 blocks in this weather— "Fine," he said abruptly. "But I'm off duty, so no other stops." The relief on the woman's face was immediate. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you so much." Wei merely nodded, starting the bus again after the last regular passenger had disembarked. He flipped the sign to out of service and took a right turn instead of pulling into the depot. The detour would take less than 10 minutes. He could explain it to his supervisor tomorrow, if necessary. He glanced in the mirror again, seeing Ming entertaining the little girl with shadow puppets against the window, the child's delighted giggles carrying to the front of the bus. As they neared Harmony Apartments, the rain finally began to ease. Wei pulled up as close as possible to Building 3. "Here," he said, turning in his seat. "This is as far as I go." And the woman stood, gathering her daughter and their few belongings. "I can't thank you enough," she said to both men. "Both of you. This kindness." Her voice caught. Ming waved away her thanks. "It was our pleasure," he said, glancing at Wei with a small smile. "Wasn't it, Mr. Wei?" Wei found himself nodding despite himself. "Be careful on the steps," he said. "They'll be slippery." As the woman and child prepared to leave, the little girl suddenly broke free and ran back to Ming, throwing her arms around his legs. "Thank you for the candy and the hat and the shadow tigers," she said in a rush, "and for fixing my arm." Ming patted her head gently. "You're very welcome, little one. The hat is yours to keep." She beamed up at him before running back to her mother, who gave both men one last grateful look before they descended the steps. Wei and Ming watched as they hurried through the light drizzle to the building entrance. Once they were safely inside, Wei turned to Ming. "Where to, old man? You don't live around here, do you?" Ming shook his head. "Sunrise Valley, near the Eastern Market. But please don't trouble yourself. You've already gone out of your way. I can catch the number 7 bus from the corner." Wei studied the elderly man, noting the damp clothes and tired eyes despite the cheerful expression. 7 years, he thought. 7 years of quiet kindness that he had barely noticed. "Get in the front seat," he said abruptly. "I'll drop you home. It's on my way." It wasn't, not really, but the words were out before Wei could reconsider them. Ming's face registered surprise, then genuine gratitude. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Wei. Thank you." The drive to Sunrise Valley was quiet at first. Wei focused on the road, while Ming sat peacefully beside him, the candy box balanced on his knees. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but Wei found himself curiously wanting to break it. 7 years, he said finally. "You've been on my route for 7 years, and I don't even know your full name." Ming smiled. "Liu Ming," he said, "and you are Wei Dai Yu, according to your name badge. Though I've only ever called you Mr. Wei out of respect." Wei nodded, slightly surprised that Ming had paid attention to his full name. "The candies," he said. "You make them yourself?" "Some of them," Ming confirmed. "The special ones. My daughter helps when she has time. The others I buy wholesale from a friend who owns a small factory." "And you sell them? Why? Surely there are easier ways for a man your age to earn money." Ming considered the question. "It connects me to people," he said finally. "Every exchange, even a small one like buying a candy, is an opportunity for human connection, and perhaps sometimes for something more." Wei glanced at him. Something more? A moment of kindness, a story shared, a smile exchanged. Ming ran his hand over the polished wood of his candy box. "In my experience, it's the small moments that often matter most." They were entering Sunrise Valley now, a modest but well-kept neighborhood of older apartment buildings and small houses. "The blue building at the end of this street," Ming directed. "Number 47. Wei slowed the bus, pulling up to the curb outside a 4-story apartment building with window boxes full of flowers despite the modest surroundings. "This is you?" Ming nodded. "3rd floor. The one with the bird feeder." Wei could see it. A carefully crafted wooden structure hanging from a small balcony, several birds taking shelter there, despite the late hour. "You made that?" he asked, nodding toward the feeder. "Yes," Ming said, a touch of pride in his voice. "I still enjoy working with my hands. Wood is more forgiving than steel and concrete were, though." "The bridges," Wei remembered. "You mentioned building bridges to that boy in the park." Ming looked pleased that Wei had been paying attention. "Yes, I was a structural engineer for 40 years. Retired 12 years ago when my hands became less steady for the detailed work." Wei tried to reconcile this information with the humble candy seller he'd seen day after day. "You designed bridges, and now you sell candy on a bus?" Ming chuckled. "Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? After my wife passed, the house was too quiet. I needed to be among people." His expression grew more serious. "And I made a promise to her, to continue sharing sweetness with the world, in whatever small way I could." There was something in Ming's voice that discouraged further questions on that topic. Instead, Wei asked, "And the community center? The food distribution you mentioned to the old woman?" "Ah, Mrs. Zhang. We've known each other for decades. Yes, I volunteer there 3 days a week. We help families who are struggling. Food, clothing, sometimes just a listening ear." Ming smiled. "You should come sometime. We can always use more hands." Wei snorted softly. "I drive a bus all day. My hands are busy enough." "Of course," Ming said, not pushing. He gathered his candy box and prepared to leave. "Thank you for the ride, Mr. Wei. It was most kind of you." Wei found himself not quite ready for the conversation to end. "The businessman this morning," he said. "Feng, he was rude to you. you didn't get angry." Ming paused at the door. "Anger rarely solves anything," he said thoughtfully. "And who knows what burdens he carries? Perhaps he had received bad news, or was late for an important meeting. Or perhaps he's just a jerk," Wei suggested dryly. Ming laughed, the sound surprisingly youthful. "Perhaps, but I prefer to give people the benefit of the doubt. It makes my own journey lighter." Wei studied the old man's face, seeing the deep wrinkles that spoke of both joy and sorrow, but no bitterness. "Your faith," he said finally. "You mention God every morning. It's real to you, isn't it? Not just words." "Yes," Ming said simply. "Very real. Like the air we breathe. Invisible but essential. And when people mock you, or life is difficult, you still believe." Ming's eyes grew distant. "I lost my wife of 47 years. My son to an accident when he was just 23. I've known hunger and hardship and war." His focus returned to Wei. "And yes, I still believe, perhaps especially then." Wei didn't know how to respond to such quiet certainty. He had never been a religious man himself, finding the concept of faith elusive and unnecessary. Ming seemed to sense his discomfort. "But that's my journey, Mr. Wei. Each person must find their own way." He moved toward the steps. "Thank you again for your kindness today. I won't forget it." "Wait," Wei said impulsively. "One more question. The little girl's mother. You gave up your umbrella, your hat, your time. You got soaked helping them. Why?" Ming paused, one hand on the rail. "Because they needed help," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And I was there." "Simple as that?" "Simple as that," Ming smiled. "Though if you want the fuller answer, I believe we're all connected, that we're meant to help each other through this life. That kindness multiplies when it's shared." He patted his candy box. "Like sweetness." Wei found himself without a response. Ming descended the steps carefully, then turned back with a final smile. "I'll see you tomorrow morning, Mr. Wei, God willing." Wei watched as the elderly man made his way slowly to the building entrance. Just before going inside, Ming turned and waved. Wei, to his own surprise, waved back. The drive back to the depot was quiet, just the hum of the engine and the occasional splash of tires through puddles. Wei found his thoughts returning to the day's events, the businessman's rudeness, the child's injury, the mother's gratitude, and through it all, Ming's unfailing kindness and quiet faith. 7 years of the same route, the same passengers coming and going, the same routine day after day, and somehow he had missed the quiet dignity of the old candy seller who had been there all along. As Wei parked the bus and completed his final checks, he found himself wondering what else, what other small moments of grace he might have overlooked in the rush and routine of daily life. The next morning dawned clear and bright. The previous day's rain leaving everything washed clean, Wei began his route as usual, checking his watch as he approached the stop where Ming typically boarded. The old man was there, black cap replaced by a slightly newer navy one, but the same blue jacket and polished candy box. He climbed the steps with his usual careful movements. "Good morning, Mr. Wei," he said, producing his pass. "Another beautiful day the Lord has made." Wei looked up, meeting Ming's eyes directly for the first time in 7 years. "Yes," he said quietly, "it is." Ming's expression of surprise quickly turned to a smile of understanding. He nodded once, then made his way down the aisle, the gentle rattle of candies following him like music. Wei watched in the mirror as Ming began his rounds, offering his wares with the same gentle persistence he always had. But today, Wei noticed the small interactions he'd overlooked before. The way Ming remembered one woman's preference for ginger, how he slipped an extra candy to a tired-looking student, the patience with which he listened to an elderly man's story about his grandchildren. When the businessman Feng boarded at his usual stop, Wei tensed slightly. But today, Feng merely nodded at Ming before taking his seat, the previous day's mockery absent. At the hospital stop, a familiar figure waited, the young mother from yesterday, her daughter's arm in a small sling, but her face bright as she spotted Ming through the window. "Candy Grandpa," she called as they boarded, using the affectionate term for elderly men. She was still wearing Ming's black cap, now adorned with a small pin shaped like a butterfly. Ming beamed at them. "Good morning. How is the arm today?" "Much better," the mother said, her demeanor transformed from the previous day's distress. "The doctor said it was just a mild sprain. She'll be fine in a week." She reached into her purse and pulled out a carefully wrapped package. "We made these for you, to say thank you." Ming accepted the package with evident delight. "You shouldn't have gone to any trouble." "It was no trouble," the woman insisted. "Just some almond cookies. Mei Li helped." The little girl nodded proudly. "I put the almonds on top." "Then they must be the best cookies in all of China," Ming declared, carefully placing the package in his bag. "Thank you both." As they took their seats, Wei caught Ming's eye in the mirror. The old man gave him a small nod, as if to say, "See? Connections." Wei found himself nodding back, something shifting in his understanding of his role in this daily rhythm of city life. He wasn't just moving people from place to place, he was part of a larger web of connections, of lives intersecting briefly but meaningfully. At the end of his morning shift, Wei made an impulsive decision. Instead of heading home for his break, he drove to Riverside Park. He found Ming at his usual spot, the candy box open on his folding stool, chatting with a group of children. Wei approached slowly, feeling oddly out of place in his uniform, away from his bus. Ming looked up, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "Mr. Wei, what brings you to the park?" Wei shrugged, suddenly unsure of himself. "I had some time before my afternoon shift. Thought I'd get some fresh air." Ming smiled knowingly but didn't press. "It's a beautiful day for it. Would you like to sit?" He gestured to a nearby bench. Wei hesitated, then nodded, taking a seat while Ming finished his transaction with the children. Once they had run off with their treasures, Ming joined him on the bench. "I've been thinking," Wei said after a moment of comfortable silence, "about what you said yesterday, about connections and helping where you can." Ming nodded encouragingly. "The community center," Wei continued, "the food distribution you mentioned. When is it again?" "Saturday," Ming said, his eyes bright with understanding. 9 in the morning until 2. Wei nodded decisively. "I'll be there, if the offer still stands." "It always stands," Ming said quietly, "for everyone." They sat together for a while longer, watching the children play and the old men at their chess games. No profound declarations were made, no dramatic conversions took place. Just two men sharing a bench in the sunshine, one who had spent a lifetime building bridges of steel and then of kindness, and another who was just beginning to understand that driving a bus could be more than just a route from point A to point B. As Wei finally stood to leave, Ming offered him a candy from his box. "For the journey," he said with a twinkle in his eye. Wei accepted it with a small bow of his head, feeling the weight of it in his palm. Such a small thing, yet somehow significant. A sweet connection in a sometimes bitter world. "Thank you," he said, meaning much more than for the candy. Ming nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Until tomorrow, Mr. Wei." "Until tomorrow," Wei agreed, unwrapping the candy as he walked back toward the bus depot. It was one of the special ones, he realized, as the flavor changed from sweet to tart and back again, just like life.